folks. In a packed program tonight. Well, change for a normal one, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
Sadly, Mr. AWK is down with an unpleasant disease.
My echo. Sorry.
For a second there, I thought I could hear myself sing that.
Yes.
So sadly, so we are delaying the published Unplugged chat number 6. I'm not a number because that was his idea, so we're going to wait for him to do it. So instead, we're slightly rushing forward. Stephen and I are going to be discussing a gentleman of whom, if you haven't heard, I hereby officially revoke your geek cards.
Well,
Edward,
that's a little harsh. I think we could be a little lenient. We will certainly, there will be some probation and maybe even some suspensions, but revoking, I don't know. That seems too Catholic to me.
Yeah, okay, maybe. Yeah, we'll give you a slide as long as you know who Edgar Rice Burroughs was. Yeah, Edward Elmer Smith, born 80. Oh, I know he was born 2nd of May, but I've forgotten the year. Stephen's probably got it right in front of him. The father of space opera. In fact, looking down his Darren, you made it. Excellent, thank you. Darren was kindly pushing our stream in the Rabbi's chat early on. So thank you very much.
Lovely.
For that as well. Welcome.
Cheers for that.
Yeah, not only is he the father of space opera, I was trying to think, and when I was looking through almost every one of his output, he's got several series. He's got more than one series of books. I can't English tonight. But most of his novels have got some degree of telepathy, psionics in them, somewhere along the line.
Even in the Skylark series, there is another level of waveform that he discovers that makes his spaceship the super powerful craft that it is at the end of the series. He's getting into mentality as a form of power. So it's everywhere within his work. Mentalism was a strong part of the E.E. Smith universes.
Yeah, very definitely. He's probably what he's most famous for is the Lensman series. I think, if I remember correctly, Skylark of Space was actually the first books he wrote, but then he moved on to the Lensman. The easiest way I think to describe the Lensman series is two galaxy wide intergalactic policemen / Boy Scouts. As I was saying to Stephen beforehand, everyone thinks Superman was a big Boy Scout. They ain't met Kimball Kinnison.
That's right.
The scope of the Lensman series goes from however many millions of years ago it is that the bad guys erupt into this universe. So yes, it's a multi-universal idea as well. There are several. It sets up a conflict. If anybody's Babylon 5 fans, think Vorlons and Shadows, and you will not be far off.
Yeah, and I would have no doubt whatsoever that is where the inspiration for those two characters comes from.
Yeah, I mean, his first book deals with 3-4 destructions of civilization on Earth, ending in the Third World War, which is a nuclear war. So we're a couple of thousand or so years after that, before we actually start the main storyline in First Lensman and go on from there.
Yeah, I mean, just to read the introduction to Triplanetary, which is the reacquired beginning of the Lensman book series. It starts off with Dawn and the introduction of these two beings, these two super beings called, the Arisians and the Andorians. And then it gets into how they're both using their powers to deal with the Earth, and they get into the fall of Atlantis, the fall of Rome, the activities of World War II, and then the final destruction of the Earth before it becomes the Triplanetary. And that's just in the first few chapters of the series.
Yeah.
There's actually a point in the beginning of the fall of Rome where one of our heroic characters comes across an incarnated Roman leader, and his eyes actually flash at him before he kills him.
Yep.
Just like the Gawaul in Stargate.
Yep.
And that was written in like the 1940s. It's insane. It's completely nuts.
And another stream through the Lensman series is something that might be a little bit might make people think a little bit these days. Literally selective breeding.
Yes.
There are characters in each of the stories who are descendants of others.
Yeah.
Because,
I think I could read the cold line, actually, is in this. They tried to keep a male and female line of Earthlings, the Arisians. They kept them apart, right?
Yeah.
And they never crossed paths, even genetically. And what they were trying to do was create not just the ultimate superhero for their cause, but also the ultimate couple for their cause, because they would procreate and create the children of the Lens who would finally end the conflict. And that's over the course of, God, how many books are we talking about? Triplanetary, First Lensman, Galactic Patrol,
Second
Stage Lensman, Gray Lensman, and then Children of the Lens brings it to conclusion.
Yeah.
A sprawling space opera. Sprawling.
And in fact, it just occurred to me also, another parallel there. The Eurasians actually managed to get their Kwisatz Haderach born the right generation, not a generation early.
That's right. That's exactly what I was thinking too when I read it. This is where Dune, where the plot line of Dune comes from, is this piece of material. This idea of breeding a super version of the race to help solve the problem.
Yeah. Because
because
they're on an equal footing with the bad guys, the Adorians, and they know that the only way they're going to win is to breed a third stage of thought, as they put it.
Mm-hmm. Right. To breed a being that could be even superior to them so that the Arisians could retire.
Yeah. And in fact, but it's not just on Earth as well. There's several other races that they start. It's an extremely busy universe. Well, come to think of it, we keep bringing up saying such and such comparisons. We're not saying any of these authors are anything other than fantastic authors. I think Doc Smith came up with these ideas, and the ideas just hang around. Everybody gets inspiration from somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And he was just the first one to put some of these ideas down. Similar to H.G. Wells, probably the first person to write alien invasion novels to write time travel novels.
Right.
We're not, that's not to say that every alien invasion novel is a rip-off of War of the Worlds. It's not. It's just an idea that he was the first to articulate and put down.
Yeah, and I think that it's fair to the culture to say that the concept of ripping somebody off doesn't even come into our vernacular until after 1975 anyway.
Yeah. I mean, people go back and forth.
They would homage, they would tribute, they
Yeah.
were inspired,
Yeah.
they spun off, they amplified, they got into more detail. Because Colin and I have discussed at length how the power suits in Starship Trooper gave rise to all of the power suits of the Japanese anime and manga universes.
Yeah.
Nobody stole anything. This is called tribute. This is called evolution. Even the Heinlein power suits were inspired by Doc E.E. Smith's power-suited armors that he created in 1920, 1930, 1940.
Yeah. I mean, it's to use a phrase that is rather abused in some ways these days. A lot of work is inspired by earlier work.
Mm-hmm.
And it is literally immediately. We said, "Oh, that's an idea." The odd thing is you can also with Doc Smith, I find, is one of the examples where it's quite easy to see that he was writing before a lot of our current scientific knowledge exists. What most people probably don't even realize is that until the early 20th century, nobody actually realized that the Milky Way galaxy was not the entire universe. That idea is about 100 years old, because we didn't have the technology, we didn't have the scientific understanding, maths, etc., until someone worked it out and looked at it, until someone worked out that these flashing things in the sky, they are that far away, they have got to be beyond the galaxy. They've got to be outside the Milky Way. And then they realised, we get the reservation that these spots, they're entire galaxies. And so the Skylark series, for example, one of the things that always sticks out to me is they go faster than light by cancelling inertia. They don't have any faster. And I believe it's somewhere, Doc Smith, I've sure seen some he actually said, well, the theory of relativity is just that, a theory.
Yeah, indeed. And just to cut in here, there is a massive movement currently that talks more to the kind of science fiction. It talks more to the kind of sciences that Doc E.E. Smith may have been reading in literature at the time. The electric universe paradigm parallels and is reinforcing most of what Doc E.E. Smith is actually talking about, and that is electromagnetism and plasma energies and all of the forces involved in that, which the physicists do not measure. In Doc E.E. Smith's time, when he wrote Skylark, they were on the path of an electric universe until relativity basically took over the game.
Well, you've only got to look at, for example, even Star Trek, the original series in the 60s. Look at their computers.
Yeah, and there are no computers in this universe.
No, but I'm saying in Star Trek universe, no microprocessors, no transistors in the original series, because the technology hadn't caught up. They hadn't been invented. I remember very vaguely, because it was a very long time ago now, asking my physics teacher if she would allow you to travel faster than light. And that's when I was a teenager, and I remember actually genuinely asking my physicist, because I probably just started reading them, and thinking, "Oh, well, that actually work?" You know, okay, so there's no inertia. So if you don't, and the thing is, it works out the ideas. So if there's no inertia, that means when you hit something at massive speed, no holdo maneuver. You hit something at massive speed, you just stop dead because you've got no inertia to keep you going.
Yeah, and I always imagined the inertialess engine, or the free drive as they call it.
Yeah,
creates a bubble where inside the ship all physics work pretty much the same, but you're basically floating as if you were just in 0G in geocentric orbit around the planet. But outside the bubble, the universe exists proper. But the universe thinks that you're just a speck of dust that weighs nothing.
I mean, the other great thing is that what it does is it puts, so the instant you switch the Bergen-Home field off, you retain the inertia you originally had. So if you were going, let's say you took off from your planet heading towards direct galactic north, you've gone all over the place, and you're now heading southeast of the galactic plane. You turn off your Bergen-Home, you shoot off up to the north.
That's right.
Because that's what you were doing. It preserves exactly where you were before.
And the author very generously says, you don't get nothing for nothing. There's no magical loss of anything here. This is still science. Inertia is inertia, and when you turn off the field, you go right back to where you were. If you were sitting in port at rest on a planet, you will retain the inertia of the port on a planet.
Yeah. Because just because you're sitting on a planet doesn't mean you're not moving.
That's right. He understood that. He understood that the planet was moving in a solar system, moving in a galaxy.
Yep. I mean, he did so many of our ideas come from them. I mean, I've only got a few of them up there. I couldn't think of all of the ones. I'd forgotten the Tedrick novels myself, and I've still not. I don't think I've got all of those.
Which ones?
The Tedrick ones. Tedrick and Lord Tedrick.
I don't even think I'm even aware of those. It's always astonishing how much more he actually wrote.
Well, it starts off as a guy on a reasonably fantasy planet who is then contacted by someone from another universe, and he's pulled into the other universe, if I remember right, and becomes Lord Tedrick, and it becomes a science fiction one. I mean, that one's Tedrick and the Space Pirates I've got up there. Space Hounds of IPC, I think, was a standalone.
Oh, it is the rough equivalent of what the Halo guys, the Halo video game guys, call the grunts. Like there's a whole separate group of people that are below the Spartans. That's kind of what the Space Hounds of IPC is. It's a whole book following a group of the Galactic Patrol as they go about their duties.
Then you've got the Subspace series, Subspace Explorers and others, where they start off, I think it's a Subspace series I'm thinking of, where you start off, they just come across this planet called Ardu and Ardri, and it transpires they're actually Earth 2 and Earth 3. And they go back at one point, they go back because they've come across these big ongoing war, which has been on hold for a while, and they have this thing where they literally Doc Smith's got this great thing saying, as has been explained before, but no, it hasn't actually been that detailed in various things, but where basically they go through this process where every atom in their body is replaced by something else. They're still here, they're still themselves. Minds and brains are still the same, but they're effectively superhuman and they've got superhuman powers. So, for example, they hide this fact when they go back to Earth by sitting in massive, great spacesuits, which are extremely radioactive. So everyone on Earth thinks they can't live anywhere outside of the radiation. They can. It's just that they don't want anybody on Earth to know what's happened, because Earth's already in this sort of thing.
Oh, that's fascinating. That's closer to the Vorlons than the other stuff.
Yeah, actually, yeah. You see saying that? Yeah, it is.
They're hiding inside their suits. They're not protecting us. They're hiding inside the suits.
Well, to the point, because what it means, of course, is that obviously others of them can go around in plain view.
Right.
No one's going to think any different of them, because they think that these that these guys that have come back are have to live in this. They've pitied them. In fact, they've given up their humanity on us, which they haven't. Another really clever idea.
Is that attached to the Masters of Space or the Galaxy Primes?
No, I don't think it is. It might be.
Those are also similar plot lines, and those are both Smith properties as well.
Yeah.
This guy was really into the concept of Uberman. He was definitely into this idea that we will eventually become superhuman if we keep going. If we just keep going, keep improving, keep honing ourselves as a species, we will eventually create and give birth to supermen. And women as well, because he doesn't even blush. There's a whole planet that is literally a feminist society. And that's in Gray Lensman.
Yes. The book that taught me that American and English are not the same language. Because there's the basic layout for the Lensman universe. The first race to arise in the Milky Way galaxy, if not because you've got the Milky Way galaxy and what we call the Andromeda galaxy are the two galaxies where all this takes place.
Right.
Starts in the Milky Way galaxy, then it moves.
Yeah, he's very American about this. He calls it the first and second galaxy. That's it.
Well, to be correct, the first galaxy we discovered, second galaxy, yeah. But
it's Dunstan's region, isn't it?
Yeah, Dunstan's Nebula. That's it.
Ah, there you go.
Yeah, because Mutter's Spire, that's Doctor Who. I think. But they start and the first race to the rise is the Elysians.
Yeah, they are, just like in Babylon 5, the first ones.
Yeah. But what they do is they spread out, and similar, in fact, to when Star Trek The Next Generation tried to explain why all the aliens are humans in with different ears and different forehead makeup.
Yep, another homage.
They come up that their idea is that Elysian spores, as they put it, are what spread life throughout the Milky Way galaxy.
And by Children of the Lens, it's kind of revealed, it certainly was slightly revealed to me, that seeding may have been wholly mental. That just by their mental exploration of the galaxy, they had contaminated evolution with their sense of self.
Well, one of the big ideas, for example, in the Lensman series is that, it's another one of these ones which effectively refers to massive amounts of history. That when the Elysians arise, there's hardly any other life in the galaxy, because there's hardly any planets in the galaxy which can bear life. But the Milky Way and I think it's Andromeda, collide. They move through each other, and the forces involved by the moving to each other basically change planets and the rest of it. It's been a long time since I've read them.
Yes. But you're right on it. That's exactly what they describe it as.
Life bearing. But so there are lots of humanoid life forms. Yes.
Yes, and semi-humanoid too.
I mean, there's lots of semi-humans. One, the Chickenodorians, for example, come to mind. The only way you can tell them from a normal Earth human is that they're pink, and I don't mean they're slightly tanned like what we would call white people. I mean they are pink.
Yep. And they have triangular, sharp teeth like the Ferengi.
Yeah, and you've got the Luranians are literally and well, they're not all female species, but their males are literally described as little homunculi who've got no brains and whose sole job is to mate. Literally.
Yep.
Sexual dimorphism that sort of we get in some species on Earth, like spiders, like some spiders. So
and he even does mention in passing us an intelligent spider race, doesn't he? Doesn't Kim come across a spider race?
I think so, yeah. Well, the thing is, he's done this, and he's doing this in the 20s, the 30s. The things he's thought these through. So he's got this point. The whole point of the Luranian civilization, for example, is that the Luranians don't actually have pronouns because they don't actually think in sexual reproductive means, because their males are literally barely sentient.
Right.
So they don't actually, they think of themselves as it. They don't have a concept of attractiveness, of beauty.
Right.
There's a point, he makes a point in describing, for example, that they don't have what they do is, rather than have a hairdresser, the Golgafrinchians will be really out of a job here. If a woman's hair gets in the way, she cuts a hang of it that's in the way out, so they look an absolute mess.
Right.
Things like this. And they have real trouble relating to the heroes, because the heroes, males, they actually have the real difficulty getting their heads around the fact that these are males, because what they think of male, these well, no, they're obviously females like us, but no, they're not. So that's where the female heroes have to come in and do a lot of the work on there.
And quite literally, too, they are very similar to the society that the character Drax of Guardians of the Galaxy. They're hyper literal. They are extremely macho in their feminist rulership of their own world.
Yeah.
And they're also, they don't wear makeup. They don't wear jewelry. They don't believe in ornamentation. They don't do art. They're a very literal, efficient society. They're just women being women, but they don't consider themselves women in comparison to Earth women or any other species of female throughout the galaxy. No. Not that they've done much exploration. They've become isolationists.
Yeah, but to explain my earlier comment about the languages, there's a bit in this where our hero's down on, and he's talking to these people, and he talks to one of his pilots in a spaceship or a flyer, and he tells him to put down a needle beam, which is basically a laser beam. Close enough for her to notice, but not close enough to burn her fanny.
Right.
And I'm picturing this in my head, right? She's sitting down as he's putting it between her knees. Because what a Brit would call a fanny is the other side of the body to what an American would call a fanny.
Oh, interesting.
Right. In American, if I want, the fanny's the bum, right? A bum bag, a fanny bag is something you wear on your back, isn't it?
Correct.
Yeah. No. In British, a fanny, Fanny, same spelling, is the other side, shall we say. Let's be polite about this.
Oh, that's fascinating. I think language, language is so amazing that way.
Until I discovered this, I'm thinking, oh, that's a bit dodgy. But no, what he was saying is, not quite pat on the bum, but, but a different picture. But I mean, as I said, a lot of their, the aliens he comes up with are not even. There's several races which are not even 3-dimensional. You've got the
Yes.
Planians, I can't remember what the Draconians are, and the Ike are described as 4-dimensional, existing in 4 dimensions. Though I'm not quite sure, presumably between 5 if you include time, so that they never look the same, and to the point that when one of our heroes manages to telepathically contact the first Polanians they come across, who are mining on Pluto, he asks what they're doing, and his lens, which is the device that lets him use his telepathy, actually makes up 3 or 4 different words because the very concept doesn't exist for humans.
Right.
Humans have no idea what dextrobing.
And to make it clear to the audience, the lens is a universal translator of all things of communication.
Yeah.
So if they look at an alien Bible or they read an alien street sign, the lens translates it for them in real time.
No codes, or codes don't work.
That's right. All codes are immediately broken because they exist as a mental construct in somebody's mind.
Yep.
So the lens has access to it.
Yep.
And that may sound like a Deus Ex Machina, but when you find out that the Arisians are always watching through those little lenses, you understand that the Arisians are doing all the translating.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that that I've actually got, I have in my hand literally my favorite reference book is the GURPS Lensman books, for anyone who knows the GURPS role-playing system. Because one of the things that Doc Smith is a man of his time, and he is today's feminists. Well, I'd like to actually have them read some of these things because they just die of a heart attack and they would no longer be a problem. He has some very particular ideas for the difference between men and women. And it's, for example, hold on, I forgot it. Yeah, okay. I'll actually read this. It's a quote from one of the books, but this is an explanation from the GURPS Lensman. Jill Sams, daughter of the first Lensman and ancestor of the Red Lensman, went to Arisia for a lens. She returned lensless and reported, Arisia, you think you go to Arisia, that's where you earn your lens, right? That Arisian was 1,000 times more of a woman than I will ever be. And she didn't wear a lens, never had worn one. Women's minds and lenses don't fit. Remember, this is a woman talking. One of our heroes talking. There's a sex-based incompatibility. Lenses are as masculine as whiskers. And of that, only very few men can ever wear them either. Very special men. She then goes on to list some of them.
Yep.
Men with tremendous drive, force, and scope. Pure killers, all of you.
Yep. And the future wife of Kimball Kinnison brings up some poetry by Rudyard Kipling, which openly describes a character named Jack O'Neill. Of all people.
Oh yeah. Well, she goes on to make the point. I want to be stopped on a glacier and twice as hard to skull. A woman simply can't have that kind of a mind. There's going to be a woman lensman someday, just one, but not for years and years. And I wouldn't be in her shoes for anything, because it's a gender essential. But that's something that GURPS, I think, quite cleverly did that. She quite cleverly addressed it. And I mean, this was written back in the. I'll find a date when this one came out.
That's in the first Lensman.
Yeah, no, but I'm thinking the GURPS itself addressing this. Copyright 1993 and 2001. So if you assume this all from 1993, it's a reprint. Early 90s, they were recognising coming out with this different ideas. But there's nothing wrong with their women. These women characters are still heroes in their own right.
Absolutely.
By God,
Yeah.
the definition of strong female character.
And there's a moment where the heroes around this particular female, who is a daughter of one of the early lensmen, they openly tell her, like, I can understand why the Arisians didn't think it was necessary to give you a lens, because they're all like, yeah, your signal mentally came through loud and clear. You don't need a lens.
Yeah.
We heard every word you were thinking. So they're naturally gifted in a mental state. They're not underpowered. They're possibly overpowered. They just don't have the killer instinct. They don't have that cold eagle eye stare that a lensman needs to survive the activities of their own office.
I mean, one other thing that they do, that they mention, is that they train. They start off the way it basically works through is there's law enforcement are always behind the bad guys, because the bad guys have got better things. We find out eventually the bad guys are actually being controlled by the big bad guys, by the by the shadows, by the Dorians. But the Eurasians come along and offer this lens, which only works, and only the good guys can have lenses. Literally, there's a point, for example, where the first lensman, I mean, the first lensman in the book is probably where I found out most of what I know or thought I knew about American elections.
Oh, yes. I'm glad you brought that up, because good grief, those chapters are so prophetic at this point.
Yeah. But the politics in it, because obviously Doc Smith understood how the Americans still, particularly how it was working in the 20s, in his lifetime, and in the 20s, 30s when he was writing it, which I would imagine is somewhat different now.
Yes,
but
somewhat.
At one point he says that all of your at some point all of your politicians will have to be lensmen, because lensmen are incorruptible, and this is a major point of it. It's not that they are, lens statement or anything, unless it's a security matter. There are some things obviously they shouldn't answer, but if it's something like moral turpitude is the phrase he uses, my God, how many politicians could actually stand to answer truthfully on that? You can demand an answer. And if they refuse to give an answer, there's something wrong, but there won't be. Because, so they set up a system to train galactic patrolmen and lensmen. Except that's not quite what they're doing. As one character has explained to them, it's not for the lensmen. The lensmen themselves could detect from a baby in the crib if that person is going to be a lensman, if they've got the total incorruptibility. It's for everybody else. It's for the people that aren't quite lensman standard, but to teach them what they can do to bring them up to be their best. That's what the whole thing's about. As you say, striving to be better.
Yeah, and there's a level of secrecy in this society that is basically trying to maintain a level of confidence in civilization by never revealing that anybody is less than anybody else.
Well, they refer to themselves as civilization with the capital C. And
Correct.
as I mentioned in the, I think that's reminds me. I forgot to do that. That's better. Doc Smith was also, he was known as, in the books, and in fact he's referred to, I think the Lensman must have been his favourite books, as Civilization's historian, because he wrote the history of the, and it goes all the way through, especially the Lensman series. I mean, his inventiveness was amazing. I mean, obviously, all his main characters are humans. Except for when they're not, because he has to bring in alien characters such as Warsaw, Nadrek, and Tregency, and others.
Yeah,
But,
and let's just get into some of those.
oh yeah,
Within the first book, which the original publishing, there is a series of books that starts off, and the actual series starts off with a book called Triplanetary. But that collection of books as a whole franchise of novels wasn't put together until 1949, 1951, when he consolidated his franchise into a single epic story. And that's when he puts in the previous civilization and the multiple falling of the Earth civilization before it becomes Triplanetary as a prehistory. That's when he puts that all together. But the book Galactic Patrol was written in serial form in 1925. So that in that book, he introduces an entire race of what he refers to as dragons.
Yeah.
And that's Warsaw. Warsaw is the superhero of this dragon species.
Yeah.
And when I say dragon, I mean right out of a Studio Ghibli anime, right out of the Chinese mythology. These guys are a cross between a traditional Eastern dragon and a snail, because he has these eyeballs that spontaneously appear out of his head. And they're not eyeballs, they're antenna to his mental perception of the universe.
Yeah.
And that's just one alien race. This guy can make alien races that are deeply intriguing. And then he bumps into Tregonci, who is basically R2-D2 standing there 5 feet tall. He's described as the size and shape of an oil drum with a dome on top, with tentacle arms that can divide into multiple tentacle arms. This guy could create some alien species.
Yeah. I mean, let's see if I can, is that going to be?
And then there's Nadrek, who is an extra-dimensional creature living on a frigid planet.
I mean, there's down there at the bottom. Can I actually? Let's see if I can. Does this let me do this? No, I'm trying to take us out so I can show the background, but I can't, unfortunately. At the top left and bottom right pictures on there are Doc Smith. Second one in, the one that looks like a cartoon, it's the only cinema televisation of the Lensman series, or of any Doc Smith that I'm aware of. There were two animes, an anime movie and there was an anime series. And my first introduction to anime, and I'd never come across anime before. Well, actually, no, I lie. Marine Boy was anime, but I didn't know it.
Right.
But this was the first anime I come across. I'm like, what the heck? These people don't look anything like you. Who are they? What are they doing?
Well, the interesting thing is that anime movie, the feature film, I never saw the series because it's been canceled, and it was canceled and blocked by the estate of Doc E. Smith.
Oh, was it? I don't know that.
The Japanese had introduced, or were trying to introduce, a Lensman universe in their anime, and rightfully so. I think the Japanese recognized that this guy actually trumps the whole Star Wars universe, and Japan was under a lot of pressure by George Lucas not to interfere with Star Wars. I mean,
that's a Volantian.
Yeah. Wow, that's an amazing illustration. I don't think I've ever seen that before.
I'm absolutely certain that's from a book called Barlow's Guide to Extraterrestrials, which is a fantastic. Wayne Barlow's an artist, and he's done lots of them, and it's absolutely fantastic. I'm not sure who's got any of the others in there. But as you say, one of the things with, for example, the Regelians, Tregency, they're blind and deaf. They have got a sense of what Doc Smith in the Lensman calls perception. It's what technically clairvoyance is, the ability to see without see around corners. They can sense things without see without sight, because there's a bit where Kennison is explaining to Tregency about sound, and Tregency goes something along the lines of vibrations in the ether, vibrations in the. He repeats it 3 times, getting more and more capitalized as he understands he's excited by this idea of a completely different concept that he'd never considered.
Yeah, and sound is the same for them too.
Yeah.
They don't see color.
Yeah.
They don't see sound. They don't hear sound.
So
when somebody drops a whole pallet of steel girders and it goes crashing to the floor, our poor lensman hero flinches, and everybody's like, "What happened? I lost you there for a second. Are you okay?" And he's like, "Yeah, I was just reacting to the noise around here."
Yeah,
and they're like, "Noise? What are you talking about?"
What's noise? What's that? What's noise? Yeah, I mean they're so cleverly thought out.
Yeah, and richly the continuity maintains throughout, and
yeah.
I
wonder if they've got any.
The Polanians are probably the most exotic creatures. I was so glad to see that he had thought that process through, that on these frigid planets, life still exists, but it exists attached to an extra dimensional plane. And that's where it gains its nutrients, that they're actually energy collectors. So they're collecting cosmic rays the way we collect vitamin D from the sun.
Yeah.
Which is like so exotic. If you think about the landscape of modern science fiction, are there races like this? I mean, maybe there are extremely reverential races like this, but in contemporary live action cinema and television, there are no alien races like this.
I don't know how well these are going to work, because they're unfortunately they're both quite small pictures, but they're covers from Doc Smith wrote 7, 8 Lensman novels.
It's Triplanetary,
First Lensman, Galactic Patrol, Grey Lensman, Second Stage, or Second Stage, Grey Lensman, Children of the Lens, 7, because you've also got
7
Masters of the Vortex.
We should have been able to guess that, because he's such a religious person. 7 seems like the obvious number for him.
Because Masters of the Vortex is actually the 7th novel in the series, but it actually comes in between Second Stage and Children. But also, an author called David Kyle wrote for the 3 out of Second Stage Lensman. So this is the cover of. Okay. Oh, damn! I've only got one of them up. Well, that's slightly irritating. I'll have to check that one. This is the cover of Z Lensman. We have it's very clever. Good grief! I don't know if that's going to come up at all, because it's only 500 flipping. But
that's looking pretty good on my screen.
But they've got this classification of life forms, and it's I can't remember how it works, but basically it's A to Z, and it's things like, what do they breathe, how many limbs, all sorts of things, and I think humans are mainly A's, and this sort of, because humans are the ones that the humans know in the first place, but they're called Z because the Polanians are Z all the way across the line. The Z's, so 4-dimensional and energies and this sort of things. All sorts of exotic. Then they got exotic ones in there, but that's what's called the Z Lensman. But that, if it's come up, that is that's the closest I can find to an image of what a Polanian looks like, because of course it has no. There we go. It has no.
Yeah, we're looking at a shadow of a dimensional shadow, basically. They are the closest thing to what we would probably refer to as a ghost or a spirit.
Oh, you're not gonna. Oh, I see what's going on there. Sorry. Now, for some reason, this isn't bloody well opening. Why is it not opening? That's frustrating. Okay, see if this will show or not. Hope. Oh, comes another one. The Z lens.
Well, I'll crack open some incense to the StreamYard gods. Let's go for it.
Yeah, and it's not that. No, it's not StreamYard. It's just for some reason every time I try to open it, it's actually downloading it. So I'll have to do this the other way.
Yeah, you could do a screenshot or something.
Yeah. Let's see. I should be able to. I should be able to.
Nadric, that's his name. Good grief.
That's
God.
Nadric is playing. Yep.
Nadric is such a fascinating character because our hero on Earth literally calls him this cowardly lensman because he's reluctant to go into action all the time. There's Tridagansi.
That's I must admit that's not quite what I originally had, but that's a David A. Kyle book. The three of them. But yeah, exactly. I mean, they say this because Nadrak calls himself says he knows nothing of courage. It's not that. It's just the way they work. They're not.
Yeah, he works so efficiently that he dare not go into a situation where he's not absolutely 100% positive he can win without harming himself.
Yeah,
and he'll choose sneakier ways to get involved.
Then again, part of Doc Smith's genius. From the human point of view, they would be cowards. Which again is one thing he makes his point of why it's a massive, great leap.
I lost you there for a second, Colin.
Sorry, it doesn't surprise me.
No worries.
Virgil Samms, first lensman, makes this massive, great. It's one of the reasons what makes Virgil Samms such an important, such a major figure. He makes this massive, great leap when he comes across the Planians on Pluto, and says. And says, the Planians puts himself down. He's something weak, poor creature, coward, wouldn't do all these things. Virgil Samms' response, not necessarily.
Yeah.
Virgil Samms is able to actually pull himself out of his human point of view enough just to understand that there are other ways of living.
Yeah, and there's an interesting thing in this because we're living in a world right now where this concept of the white knight is seen as a bad idea in literature, and I agree in a lot of ways. I don't think that the humans are going to go out into space and become the superheroes of the universe. The Arisians actually admit in the future that the human beings were the most likely to succeed because we were the quickest to action. We were the most brutal and concise to action as well. And that the other races are not inferior because of this. They're just less capable. We are a sharp sword all the time. And some of these other races are not. Some of them have been enslaved and never got over it, like Warsaw and his race, because they were enslaved by a vampiric species that lived on their planet.
Very similar to them as well.
The humans are not the heroes of the story. They're just the most powerful weapon at the Arisians' command.
And the thing is that we keep going on and on about the lensman. We could go on about the lensman for. Well, the lensman is probably one of the ones that's the big.
Yes, but the Skylark series has its own merits.
I was gonna want. There's actually a series which Doc Smith started on. I don't think he finished, which has actually got longer. It's actually a longer series, and it is James Bond in space. No, wrong one again. Sorry, I keep doing this. Keep clicking on the wrong flipping window. You'd think I'd have learned by now. I obviously need to go and do the
Yes, all
Because
monkeying around is charming. Go
yeah,
for it, Colin.
yeah. The Family D'Alembert, Stephen Golding.
My God, this guy is so damn
Yeah,
prolific. When did he have time to invent donuts?
I don't know. But I mean, the thing is, the covers on that are fantastic. I've got these. I had 9 of these books for
Oh my God, there's more
years.
reading. Oh my
I had.
God.
Fortunately, they're all quite short. They're not sort of the Game of Thrones size books. You didn't get Game of Thrones size books in the 20s, the 30s, and the 40s. But they are the Family D'Alembert are a family. They're not MI6 CIA. So I say James Bond is slightly wrong. They're FBI MI5. They're sort of internal security for a completely different universe. But you've got the Emperor. It's got similarities to Dune. You've got the Emperor, and then you've got the great houses, and the Dukes own systems and sectors. And when I say own, I mean own, rule, and so on. And the D'Alembert family, they're a circus family, but they had this circus, Galactic Touring Circus, great cover. But when they get to a certain point, they retire from the circus and become secret agents. And that's what the series is about. And as I said, I had 9 of them. I had 1 to 8 and 10. And then I finally discovered the internet and ebooks. And I finally managed to get an ebook of number 9 so I can read them all. Because I didn't read 10 because they are, even though they're individual separate ones, and even the characters change. Again, as I say, 10 books all the way through to the end of them. So again, Retief, Keith Lammer's Retief. Not sure when Lammer was writing, but I think that was a similar sort of concept. Again, intergalactic troubleshooter, or interstellar troubleshooter.
It's interesting that you bring up this concept of a James Bond in space, because make no bones about it, the Lensman series is the Secret Service in space.
Yeah,
and
which is true.
Just to nail that home, the name Kimball, for Kimball Kinnison, our hero of the story, or the father of the eventual heroes of the story, is based on the character by Rudyard Kipling, Kim, which is said to be one of the earliest spy novels of Britain. Yeah. And it covers the education of a young boy who is living in India, who travels with a Tibetan monk while on special missions for the Secret Service of Britain. Yeah. Yep. He's basically an early MI5 agent. Yeah. And the interesting thing is that Smith read this book before he started this series and was probably inspired by it, because Kimball, in the story, Kim, when he graduates and becomes an agent on trial, he receives a mental education by a jeweler. And when he finally graduates from this mental education, he is gifted an amulet that is kind of like a secret passcode. All you have to do is reveal this amulet on your chest, and this amulet will give you free passage in the face of any other agents in your presence.
Wow. You know, so I don't think I've ever read Kipling. I really must.
It's a fascinating thing to look at, because this is the book that was part of his childhood. Yeah. So the never-ending spiral into where everybody gets their tropes from continues to go downward. It's incredible, and I'm sure Kipling based it on something from his childhood, which is hysterical.
Yeah. But I mean, Smith is. I mean, he is so influential
Mm-hmm.
And we said, I mean, the Skylark, I think, were the first ones he did, and the Skylark starts getting ever bigger, ever better ships. You've got the arch nemesis in there, who actually isn't really necessarily a bad guy on his own. He's just got his
Are you
own
talking
agenda.
about Duquesne?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. Duquesne is never, he's always a villain, but he's never the bad guy because he actually winds up joining forces with them in the first book and then again at the end of the series.
Yeah, well, the last book, I think the last one, I think it's called Skylark Duquesne.
Yep. Yeah. And he winds up being the more powerful. He's actually what Smith is talking about human masculine force, because Duquesne can survive because he becomes cold. When he grits his teeth and focuses his forces, he is cold as ice, and he doesn't give two shits about anything. So it's this man, as old school as he is, brings up stuff that movies like Fight Club are talking about.
Yeah. And I mean, you look at something like the Galaxy Primes, one off. Again, you got real smart, real intelligent. I think from the Galaxy Primes, I think a lot of his universes, if I remember what, most of the races are human. I think the Galaxy Primes, I think the aliens are humanoid as well. I think most of them.
Doesn't he come across a mechanoid where and one member of the group needs to become fully mechanoid in much the same way that the anime series Galaxy Express and Queen Amaraldus is a daughter of a mechanized race.
That in Subspace Explorers is a bit where they become, they become effectively, I suppose, androids.
Yeah, they become they're completely, all of their atoms are transformed into a metallic form of the atoms.
I think they're still human.
And they still function as human, but they're made of a different material.
They don't want to give up their humanity, so I believe they're still able to reproduce as much for starters, I think.
Yeah, I forget now. I've only gone through that one once, but
this
man's brain, I swear, I don't think that, because you look him up on Wikipedia and they say that, he was working at a candy factory as a chemist, and he was working at a food processing factory as a chemist. And you know what? That sounds like an awfully good cover for a secret agent, because that's the way I feel about this guy.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, I don't know who this guy was for real, but I think this guy was a hell of a lot more than he lets on to, because he was a ballistics chemist during World War II. He probably helped save hundreds of thousands of lives with some of his work in the ballistics department for the U.S. military.
Well, he came up with, I'm trying to think, I know I've seen Heinlein somewhere, Heinlein referring back to Smith, because Smith also came up with space navies, and he come up with the idea, for example, I mean, I've seen somewhere, I can't remember what it was, but Hein referring back to being inspired by the Z9M9Z and the tank they have to show. It's based, Z9M9Z is a massive, great spaceship, a warship. The Dauntless, I think.
Yes. Yeah, it's High Command. It's where it's fleet operations
number, I think. But they have in the middle of the thing, they have this tank, and it's basically what these days we would call a hologram. But this is what the 20s or 30s used to come up with this idea, and I'm sure I saw Heinlein somewhere referring back to that, saying he was inspired by that as well.
And it's basically the only way that you could coordinate millions of fleets, not millions of ships, millions of fleets from various planetary origins throughout the galaxy. And you could depict the fleets moving from one galaxy to another galaxy within this tank. And it takes up the whole center of the room like some gigantic fish tank of moving dots throughout the galaxy. It's incredibly inventive.
But you've also got the thing throughout this, you've literally got you've got. I mean, the clearest example is probably the several conflicts you get in First Lensman. You start off with the bad guys attack, and the good guys just about beat them back.
Mm-hmm.
So the bad guys improve their tech, but the good guys improve their tech as well, so that who's going to improve their tech better. This sort of thing. They keep underestimating the other side and this sort of thing. But when it comes to Galaxy Primes, the basic premise for that is that humanity, as I say, most of the alien worlds they visit are also humans, but they're not humans from Earth. I don't think they're either seeded there early on, but it's not an Earth empire or anything like that. And you've got talent.
Yeah, they almost describe them as mutants, don't they?
Well, yeah, almost. I mean, what they are, the way they work is there are certain levels again of psionics, and you've got I can't remember exactly how it works, but you've got something like 4 or 6 B level mutants, like and the primes is 1 male and 1 female prime on each planet, and they are way above, and they butt heads. And the Galaxy Primes is great because both of the main heroes, the main hero and the main heroine, start off as somewhat obnoxious, unlikable characters, but they don't get their comeuppance. They bang their heads, and they learn. And there's one fantastic bit where one of the best bits is where the female lead, who has been almost an absolute bitch. She's described, for example, as the sort of things they have is where her hair sticks out. Every single hair is at slightly different angles, massive great ball, and she's just doing that by sheer telekinetic power and all this sort of thing. And she gets her lesson, and then she's described as the guy almost doesn't recognize her because she's just in an ordinary dress. Her hair's brown down straight because she's learned that there are more important things. There are development in that thing. When she starts off, she starts off. I won't start using actresses' names, but certain actresses come to mind, especially being as she starts off apparently blonde. But they learn, and they come up, and they learn that there are other species, there are other people out there, and there's other threats out there. They come across other races, again, other humans, and others who've got different ways of thinking, but are just as powerful. I say, and they come up, and they butt heads, and they come across as something they can't do, and they can't do when they're old, and they have to get help, and they learn.
Mm-hmm.
The Galaxy Primes, I think, is possibly the best one for that I can think of off the top of my head, of actual specific in one book.
Yeah, and I don't know if you're familiar with with much of the Marvel Comics universe, but there is a character named Medusa that quite literally, with her psionic abilities, can use her hair as a weapon.
Oh, I know, from the redhead from the City Eternals. I know
Yes, yes, exactly.
Didn't they do a TV series a while ago with that?
They attempted to do something that they were calling a TV series, but it was basically I don't know what the hell that was.
But I think at one point they at one point all her hair got cut off, didn't it? In the TV series, I think.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I'm trying to what are they called? The Immortals?
The Immortals, yeah, something like that. One of them. But yeah, I'm familiar with. I'm familiar with the character now you mentioned it. Yeah. Yeah, the thing is I mean, you can trace, as we said, you can trace so much back to Doc Smith. And I mean, I think the only person I can think of who was perhaps equally influential would be Edgar Rice Burroughs. I mean, yes, obviously Verne was influential. Wells was influential, but in a different way. But I think the only person, perhaps, you know, I mean, with the Bossing series, Burroughs sort of created space adventure in a way.
Right. And the property I was talking about before is called the Inhumans.
The Inhumans, that's it. Thank you. Yeah.
That's who Medusa was a part of. And she was an ancient precursor to the mutants in the Marvel Universe, which is kind of like what these Galaxy Primes are like. They're kind of like precursors to humanity, or evolved members of humanity that basically just leave the Earth because they're like, you guys are being silly. We're going to go look out into space and see if there are bad guys out there that you guys aren't even thinking about just yet. And they discover them.
Oh dear, I'm now going to have to spend the next 6 months rereading my entire Doc Smith library. This was not a good idea.
It's just to show you how vast this collection. Here are two gentlemen that have read almost the entire collection, and I'm still discovering stuff from you, Colin. So this man is, and most people have not even heard of this artist.
Yeah,
which is crazy. There's a moment at the beginning of Galactic Patrol where we are introduced to a spherical space station described as a gray small moon. And all I can hear is Obi-Wan going, "That's no moon, it's a space station." And Doc Smith wrote this in the 40s.
Yeah.
Or in the 20s or something like that.
It's
all there. Every single piece of 20th century cinema and television live action and animation, it's all there. Power suits, psionic powers. I mean, Charles Xavier is nothing compared to any lensman in any duty station.
No, I mean, they got, because the other thing is, the whole thing with the lensman is there's your basic lensman is has to have his lens with him, because his lens is a focus and a power.
It's a crystal ball on his wrist or somewhere embedded on his body.
What you then get is when you get second stage lensman, that is the next stage up. So, for example, Kinnison learns to do other things. I mean, he's a human until one of the things I describe is he actually gains the power of perception.
Yes.
And he describes it as the way Doc Smith describes it, he doesn't even realize he's using it until he realizes he's looking at a clock and he sees inside the clock. And he realizes he's not seeing with his eyes anymore. Then he checks to make sure, has they made him blind? No. And he can read minds remotely. Now he doesn't need to have the lens all the time. I mean, there's one bit, for example, where, as you said, there's a lot of undercover work in this. He goes undercover, and they describe him because the bad guys are also telepaths. They can read minds. He's not pretending to be. He is a drunken, drug-riddled sot. Is the way he's actually described. Until he needs to go swing into action, when he just shakes it off, brings himself in, swings back into action, because that's the power of the mind. You know, that's the second stage. And what there's, the whole thing is building up to the children of the lens, who are the children of two second stage lensmen. Although, well, interesting, because Clarissa
McDougal. God bless her merry little soul.
Yeah.
God, I love that woman. She makes me cry every time she talks.
But she's the aforementioned only woman who ever to wear. Well, however, actually, she's not technically speaking the only woman who will ever wear a lens, because her 4 daughters do as well.
Correct.
Oh yeah. Only at one point they don't so much. Where you got to remember this lens is for concentration and amplification, right?
Right.
There's
Yeah, it's a
one
point
bit,
of focus. You could even
yeah,
call it a Z pinch.
yeah. There's one bit where, okay, so the whole point of this is they keep, and each of the four main races, humans, Polanians, Volantians, and Rugelians, are thought to be the best chances for the third stage of how's it described to actually. Give me just a second.
Yeah, and it is hinted. It's hinted that the daughters of Clarissa and Kim,
Third level of lensmanship, that's what they call it.
are actually they all have crushes on a second stage lensman.
Yeah. Well, they what I was going to say was the thing is, and the way it works out is obviously because the humans are the main characters. The humans are the ones that eventually meet, and the others never meet their complements.
Right.
That we know of. I mean, we don't know.
Well,
I mean,
that's what I was
right.
hinting at. It's hinted in Children of the Lens that the daughters will eventually procreate using the lens, using the third stage of lensmanship as a procreation device. They will produce offspring with each of their crushes. One will go with Warsaw, one will go with Treganci, and the other one goes with Nadric.
I didn't see it that way, because the way I saw it was that the way they do is, and then so what you get is Clarissa and Kim finally get together after almost as much fuss as Ross and Rachel in Friends.
Right.
But together, no, sorry, we're about to go and get married. You can't, there's another crisis.
That's right.
But eventually they get that, and they have, and then we have a skip of 20 or 18, 20 years. You get Kit Kennison, Christopher Kennison, the son is the firstborn. Then you get the four girls, Cam, Kat, Kay, and can't remember the fourth one. But the way
Constance,
I think
is it?
Constance, yes, Constance, yes, thank you, Constance.
Good grief.
So yeah, you've got these kids. Basically, they are the third stage of lensmanship. The way I tend to look at it, I don't think they have a slight question, but the way I read it is they each represent they've each got a particular strength, and each one's particular strength. They're all third stage lensmen, even though none of the women ever go through any training. They always just get their lenses.
Right, they were just born that way.
Yeah,
they can produce their own lenses on their body by just mentally exerting.
Yeah, literally up and down their wrists like a load of bracelets on one description.
Yeah, it's hysterical.
But the way I always saw it was that each of them, in turn, they've got because of the way their minds develop, they've got a particular affinity for a mental affinity for each of the second stage lensmen. So as you just say, one tends to work well with Nadric, one with Trig, one with Warsaw, and one with Kim, one with her dad. And Kit is the control crystal, if you like. Because
he's definitely considered to be kind of like a matrix point, or an axis.
Because there's one bit which always makes me impressive, where they're literally described as they put their arms around each other.
Yeah, I'm trying to find that actually.
And they're concentrating for a particular purpose. And
they fuse and become a 5-part fusion.
Well, yeah, they become the unit, which is what mental is resolved. But more to the point, they're doing this. They are literally clinging into space. But we said the lenses are these little things on your wrist.
Mm-hmm.
Their lens, well, let's put it this way: you've got 5 adults, young adults, but adults, standing in a circle, arms around each other, head bent over like a rugby scrum, and there's a bloody great lens, and they're inside it.
Yep.
The air gradually creates a lens of its own. You know,
Which, and I put this up on Twitter not that long ago because I was astonished to discover, how few people understood how deep and rich the lore of the Smith universe actually was. This is probably the first incarnation of what we in modern culture would refer to as the Voltron team. 5 young people get together and form a giant robot. This is basically what what Kinnison's children do in Children of the Lens. They combine together as a single being to attack the ultimate enemy.
Thank you. I've now got a picture in my mind of the 5 Children of the Lens going, it's morphing time! Thank you.
That's
very
where the
much
Japanese might have gotten the whole concept from.
We just have to work out which of the daughters is the pink one. No. Down boy.
No, don't do it. No.
Down boy.
None of the daughters are soft either, which is my favorite part. They're all the most brutal young ladies. They just slap people around without even hesitating. They're so the characters in this are astonishingly contemporary.
I mean, they if you can, they are good, powerful characters, but they are written by an author of his time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they all cuddle around Kit.
Yeah,
when they're uncomfortable, they see him as a big brother and as an anchor. They call him the Rock of Gibraltar at some point.
Yeah, well,
they are daughters in their own right, yet they will turn around and totally screw up your whole civilization if you screw with them. Do not touch my family's front step.
Yeah,
we will massacre your whole planet.
Yeah, we'll argue, but my God, don't you piss any of my family off? Yeah,
that's right.
But it's such a very well. When you consider it's nearly 100 years old, probably. Maybe.
Well, in 2019, the original publication of Skylark turned 100 years old.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah. So Skylark, so the Lens went a little bit later than that, but yeah, it's. I was going to say, Skylark again is probably the original space opera. The Lensman I think is bigger in scope, but Skylark was only 4 books long. But again, that's a similar idea again.
And it starts off with the accidental discovery of a material that is never referred to as anything other than X.
Yeah,
I think that one race refers to it as the metal of power, but that's about it. It never gets an official name.
That's where I was getting mixed up. Yeah, the Skylark, the Lensmen have the Bergenholm device, which
Correct.
Negates. Skylark of Space is the one where Smith said relativity is only a theory, because in Skylark they just put the power into it and it goes faster than light.
Because they have a repulsor field on the outside of the ship that when it goes to full power, and they didn't even calculate this, both of the heroes of the story are a little astonished that when they put the repulsor field up to full power, it actually creates a bubble that isolates them in time and space.
Yeah, but didn't the original literally just went faster than light? Forget relativity. They said, okay, that's a theory. No, if you put enough power into it, it can go faster than light. I thought that was. Again, it's been a long time since I've read them, but
yeah, it probably gets a little mushy as far as the science is concerned. But then again, I was in an argument with a friend of mine just recently about this, that science in the physical sciences is suffering an age of crisis right now, because they need to grow out of this idea that the universe is not entirely physical, that there are forces surrounding these physical items that participate in their existence. And Smith's universe covers this material.
Well, we call it dark matter and dark energy because we don't know what it is.
Well, and the electric universe model refers to it as plasmas and electromagnetic fields.
Yeah. It's amazing that so much of this stuff was written so long ago. As I said, it is definitely, it is definitely classic. It is classical. It's classic science fiction. It's as
Yeah, you could
classic
say
as
golden
Wells.
age. I think
Yes.
you could say
Oh,
golden
definitely.
age
I
because
mean, it's,
he is a child of what Jules Verne and H.G. Wells were producing.
yeah. I mean, it's amazing to me. I think that some of these. I mean, God, would you not love to see someone a decent, competent producer do the Lensman, do Skylark?
I would, and I would go so far as to say that they wouldn't even have to attempt the actual Lensman series. Could you imagine a police noir drama done as a 1940s style noir of a single Lensman just going about his duties on a single duty
Yeah,
station? That
yeah,
would be fascinating. He steps into a bar, he explores the bar with his mentality. He discovers where the bad guys are because they're wearing thought screens and they only appear as shadows to his
yeah.
mentality.
I
I
mean,
mean, it would be so visually dynamic and interesting. It would never need to go above a cop drama.
some of the things again, Smith's descriptions, as you say, he can see, he's a scanner, and he can actually see where the mind shields, where the thought shields are, because they're blanks. They stand out like blank spots.
Mm-hmm.
And
And the power of perception
yeah,
is also kind of like our thermograph because there are moments in combat where Kimball can see through walls.
yeah,
So he doesn't need to do anything but keep a wall between him and the enemy, and he could see where all the enemies are. So
yeah,
at some points they're shooting each other because he's lined them all up. It's
yeah,
he is a superhero as in the comic book sense. He has
yeah,
superpowers.
yes.
And
I mean,
RoboCop steals from this as well because it's kind of the same thing. There are prosthetic mechanisms that keep combat veterans in shape. The commander of the fleet has multiple prosthetic devices on his body to compensate for all the combat duty he went through.
until they discover the Phillips process and regrow everything.
Right. And they even have regeneration. Kimball Kinnison
Yeah.
predates Wolverine in his capability of being regenerative.
I mean, the thing is, not only that, but they come up with some great description when they come up with this. And again, he takes it. He follows the logic. You've got a bit of a description where one of the characters is. I mean, it's not. It comes in. It's Phillips process. It comes in much later. It comes in later in the series. It's not there in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that comes in. So again, they're not Mary Sue's, Gary Stews, or anything like this. They train and they lose, and the tech improves as they go on. But there's one bit of a description where I think it's Admiral Haynes. Well, one of them is
Yeah, it's Admiral Haynes.
and he's great, and his teeth are great, and because what it does is it literally regenerates. It literally makes missing body parts grow. So this guy's talking about his teeth growing back in again, and he said it's like like having to munch on things like a baby because he can't eat anymore.
Right. Yeah. He's like, I can't live on soup, man. I need to
His
eat
teeth are
meat for
growing back
crying
in.
out loud. I got things to do.
Yeah, they literally follow it through to they take the logic. They say, okay, so what would this actually mean?
Yeah. And the doctor even gets into the idea that they haven't made them immortal either because
Yeah,
his hair grows in gray.
yeah,
His skin regenerates wrinkled.
yeah.
He doesn't become hyper youthful. He just grows back all of the parts that are actually missing
And
because the mental field is actually a kind of plasma soul or aura that
yeah, I mean, I'm,
like Carillion photography. The limb is still there mentally.
yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head either if it's an ongoing process or if it's a treatment. So if you lose a body part again, you have to go through it again to regrow. I can't remember.
If I recall, it was a one-time process, but it
Right.
does not make you immortal. It just
No.
makes you you would never need prosthetics.
Yeah.
If somebody chops off a finger, the finger will grow back, but it'll grow back at the same age as the rest of your body.
Yeah. And it doesn't grow back like a special effect. It grows back.
Yeah, it grows back normally, like, just the same way it would if it was never gone. It grows back as quickly as it did when you were being born.
Yeah. Similar to the way, in some ways, that Heinlein describes in Starship Troopers, where they is it Starship Troopers or is it
Well, in the contemporary sense, it's very similar to the way Deadpool grows back his hand.
I'm thinking
his hand gets chopped off, and it's a baby hand growing on top of his adult limb.
It grows back quickly again, but it doesn't grow. It doesn't grow immediately. It grows back at an actual rate. I'm trying to think. There's this,
and they're hungry too, which is hysterical. They actually they get hungry because these regenerative forces still require nourishment to be active. It's not a magic power like it is with Wolverine. Wolverine would collapse every time he regenerated because where's all the nutrients coming from to create these bones again? What is it, just being tapped from like zero space? It's like, come on.
I'm not sure. It's either Starship Troopers or it's Forever War. But the description of one of the characters,
Heinlein is such an incredible.
Going back limbs, and literally they describe at one part that they're in hospital, and I think there's a metal skeleton, and I've got a bag, and literally the body is growing back from the inside out. So at one point he described, and there's literally muscles growing, and the blood vessels growing, and nerves actually growing. And I can't remember if that's Starship Troopers or the.
Yeah, I don't think that's Starship Troopers. I only just recently reread that, and I don't recall. So it's got to be from another one of Heinlein's vast.
No, I don't think it's one. I think if it's not, I think it's probably the Forever War, out by Haldeman.
But it just goes to show. I wanted to bring up another one. The hyperspatial tube.
Yeah.
Is basically the birth of the Stargate universe.
Yeah.
In a single device. They just ran with one device from this universe and turned it into an entirely different franchise.
Yeah. I mean, as far as I know, he came up with those before the concept of wormholes.
Yeah, they actually create an artificial wormhole. Yeah. The aliens create it, and then the Galactic Patrol seizes the technology.
Yeah. Because they didn't.
And they're able to create these artificial wormholes where whole enemy fleets can suddenly appear at the periphery of our solar system to combat Earth.
Because they discovered that there's a limit.
Yes, there's a celestial limit to how close you can form a wormhole to the solar system.
But I mean, they've even got these things. I mean, the scale of this is amazing when you think. There's, for example, there's one battle where they take out the enemy stronghold.
Yeah.
By the simple thing of a nutcracker, as in hyperspatial tube, each side of the planet. Down each tube comes another planet. With directly opposite inertia, smack into the nut in the middle. They smash planets together.
Yep.
At one point, then they come up with the negosphere, which is antimatter.
Yeah. Before it doesn't even refer to itself as antimatter. No, it's like it's an empty hole. It's long before the imagery of Interstellar gave us the black hole the way it's supposed to be visualized.
Yeah,
the negosphere was existing in the Smith universe.
Yeah, I mean, it's the scale is definitely. I mean, it's definitely space opera. I mean, the scale of most of what he wrote. As I said, I mean, the Lensman in particular is definitely.
The sad part is that so much of his material has been cannibalized that any representation of it in the modern world would have the John Carter effect. and they'd just be like, "Oh, this is ripping off this, that, and the other thing." It's like, no, 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 you don't get it.
No,
This is
this came first.
leapfrogging. This is
Yeah.
where they got it from in the first
Yeah.
place, you silly guys.
This came first, not that. You know, this is the eggs from which all those chickens hatched.
And one of my favorite parts about the Galactic Patrol universe is that because Smith is writing this from the early 20th century, everything is physical. They use maps that are scrolled up on a bookshelf. They use books. They have written documents. And it took me a long time to figure out, but the whole book series is basically about securing things against forces that can produce anything at will by using mental forces.
Yeah.
So you would need everything to be physical because virtual stuff like our electronics cannot be trusted. You need the proof of the artifact to be able to proceed, because in a military format, you can't trust electronic hardware because electronic hardware can be hacked. Smith didn't know about this, but we are now discovering that virtuosity is not necessarily the way to go. We need physical artifacts.
As we keep saying, hard copy, folks, hard copy of everything.
Yeah, I mean, this is where our current, dilemmas are coming. You keep your DVDs on the shelf because they're altering properties in real time on these websites.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. You said that whether or not they use slide rules in the Lensman. I know they do.
They do.
I mean, I know they're doing.
They do, but the slide rules that they're using, I actually came up with this imaginary construct of what these calculators are doing, because calculators in Smith's universe are the names of duty stations. There's a person sitting at a console, and they are running a calculator, and that this calculator is entirely physical. So imagine an infinitely long slide rule because the whole station is in its own isolation field. So there's no physics to worry about. So he just pushes his hand across a slide rule and it goes to all of these infinite calculations. And he's doing this all physically with hand and foot pedals, because the pilots have multiple foot pedals. They're literally described as a person at an organ console.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in a way, technology-wise, the close I could think of actually is Hidden Figures, the film about the ladies at NASA.
Oh, okay.
Specifically, if you're not seen it, unfortunately, there were some scenes in it which are inaccurate, but it's a fantastic movie, made just before woke hit, because these days it would be woke as shit, except it's a true story. All three of the coloured ladies involved were real, and Alan Shepard really did want one of them doing the calculations when he went into orbit. If you've not seen it, it's got Kevin Costner in, and it's a fantastic scene where because obviously it's set in the 50s, and there's a fantastic scene in it where the main character comes back, and Kevin Costner turns around to her and he says, "Why do you keep disappearing?" Because I say all the three main leads are black females, as the original characters were, and she says something along the lines of, "I have to go halfway across the compound because there are no coloured bathrooms here."
Oh my God!
Yeah, the next scene, right, is them standing outside a toilet saying whites only. Kevin Costner with a wedge smashing the sign down and saying something along the lines of, "We all pee blue here." In other words, as I say, unfortunately, that is not, as I understand it, that is not an actual thing that happened, although the similar situation, but it's a fantastic visual. It's literally smashing and saying, I want you to say, "Sodish, we don't have segregated toilets here. It's a woman's toilet in the story." I know, but because obviously it does show the things and the problems that these ladies went through in the 40s and the 50s, and they went on. I mean, they say at the end what these three ladies went on to, and it's amazing.
I tell you, when I was in the military, that is one kernel of memory that I continue to have resurrected in my head all the time. And I was astonished when I heard it as a young man, when my drill sergeant, who was a man of color, and he was a capital MAN, man of color, turned around to a bunch of black guys in the unit arguing with a bunch of white guys in the unit. And he's like, I don't know what you guys are arguing about. We are all green here.
Yeah, we're all Martians.
That is the only color in my military. We're green.
Well, the reason it reminds me of that, in fact, is that actually one of them is an engineer, but you were saying about calculators, because the calculators were the ladies, black and white, and it's this great bit at the end where I think it's Kirsten Dunst plays the character, as actually, who'd been typically 40s, 50s. I'm not sure racist is the right word, but had a separatist viewpoint, if you like, if I'm going to put it that way, actually turns around and says, well done and congratulations. But calculator was the lady who sat in front of a calculating machine and did the calculation. It wasn't the device itself. It was the adding machine. So I say that's what that sort of technology level reminds me of. As you say, written before the age of computers, written before the age of LCD screens, etc.
Right. Yet one can imagine that in the near future, some of this robotic farming equipment may be referred to as a farmer.
Yeah.
In much the same way that we refer to as a calculator as a calculator.
Yeah.
Because the device has become prime, not the activity of calculating.
I'm not sure computer wasn't actually a job description as well.
There's actually a term in the 20s called a reckoner, and they were basically calculators.
Because I think computer, because I think, or I could be wrong, that it's actually spelt with spelt COMPUTOR. I think, but I could be wrong there.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting.
Because
like an observer.
Yeah, but no, but that's as in someone who does the computing, whereas ER is a machine, like what we're both sitting at now. I presume, unless you're sitting in front of your phone. But I think I could be wrong about that, because there's odd things with ER endings and OR endings have slightly different meanings. But a calculator and a computer weren't always the hardware; they were the wetware. They were the operator of that machine. And until we developed the technology to the point where we don't need to operate it anymore. We just tell it what we want it to do.
Yeah, that kind of technology, just like it barely exists. He does talk about automated machinery, though.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Like I was telling you backstage, that there's an introduction that was done by an 80s sci-fi author when the Smith series was republished during the 80s, and during the popularity of published science fiction in the 80s due to the Star Wars effect. This guy talks about how Smith's universe doesn't have any computers, they don't have any robots, and that's all wrong, because there are calculating machines that characters in story describe as being intelligent enough to almost make you a sandwich. And there are automatic mannequins that that operate battle armor during a demonstration, because the armor is not proven, so you don't want to get inside the thing. But there's a robotic mannequin that performs the duties inside the armor to go through the test run. So there are robots in the Smith universe, and these descriptions come from pre-World War II descriptions of science fiction in these stories. So Smith's universe it just doesn't have the vocabulary of the contemporary science fiction. It is describing it, though.
I know,
the language shift in the 20th century does go from Edwardian, language in the English tongue to the more American forms of it in the second half of the 20th century, when science fiction, I guess, became more of where science was actually changing the language by classifying itself.
Well, I mean, it's what amazes me. Thank you, Darren. Computer obsolete, person who calculates or computes. Thank you. I thought there was a one with the odd changing spelling there. Well, yeah, I said operator is an OR, isn't it?
Right.
I mean, this is the thing that gets me amazed. Always amazes me about science fiction is sort of people. It used to be, not so much now, because of it's getting to be quite well known science fiction. But people always used to sort of look down on science fiction. I mean, Star Trek, etc., was never nominated for awards and the rest of it. And people sort of said, science fiction, the Buck Rogers stuff.
Yeah, okay. It's funny how it's dismissed in a way. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Find out how many NASA astronauts, just in the States alone, how many NASA people were inspired by Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
Is it Mae Jemison, the lady I'm thinking of? First coloured astronaut shuttle commander, I believe. And I believe I could be wrong about this, and I don't mean to be dismissive, but I believe she actually is quoted as having said her inspiration was one Lieutenant Uhura. A number of people that have said they've done this, or I saw an interview with Jerry Doyle of Babylon 5 saying that he and Bruce Boxleitner got flights in fast jets, NASA training jets, because NASA people were fans of Babylon 5. What is science fiction? What's the good of science fiction? It inspires people. Science fiction was the first. Arthur C. Clarke came up with the idea of the communication satellite 30 years before the space race had even come about.
That's right.
Heinlein, I don't know. Heinlein did 2 or 3 books about moon landings before the Apollo moon mission, before Apollo 11.
Oh yeah, and Jules Verne did one, as well as H.G. Wells did First Man on the Moon.
Yeah, but what it does, it inspires people, and people think this, and which I think in some ways is one of the problems with a lot of at the risk of getting into the moaning, groaning, and whinging. A lot of modern sci-fi isn't particularly inspirational.
Yeah, I think that that the current fields of science have done more to disturb the creativity of science fiction than they've done to help it.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
We're so stuck in our belief that science has a wrench around all things in the universe, that they understand the nature of the universe better than anybody in the past, that science fiction feels it necessary to accept contemporary scientific understanding as the only level of scientific understanding. And it's hurt science fiction more than it's helped it.
I've always wondered, well, I say, you know what I mean when I say that. If we do officially, openly make contact with aliens, if someone comes down and lands on the White House lawn, what they want to do, or whatever, I've always thought science fiction fans are either going to be the most accepting or the most skeptical.
Yes, well, don't we have Arthur C. Clarke's book on the subject?
Yeah.
Because there's an alien race that refuses to reveal itself in the novel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But no, what I mean by that is why I really find people sort of accusing science fiction fans of being racist, and they're like, sorry, science fiction fans are the people who are going to root for people from people from other planets who don't even look like bloody humans.
That's right.
Science fiction fans are probably the most likely people to look at a human being and saying that's a human being. Next. But science fiction fans are perhaps the ones who are going to be the most open to the concept of, wow, at long last, real aliens.
That's right.
But
I wonder how many anatomical differences they have. I wonder how many mental and social and anthropological differences they have. They'll be eager to find out.
Yeah. Or will be that cynical, oh God, so it looks like a special effect again. Okay, so let me see. So that's someone's ripping off childhood end there. Yeah, because we're so used to it. Are we going to be, our science fiction fans going to be cynical because we're so used to it? Or are we going to be saying, yeah, I mean, it's I mean, knowing, no disrespect to people who aren't science fiction fans, but I think there's a certain type of mindset, not good, not bad, but particular, that draws one to science fiction.
I've always seen the science fiction masters as being fishermen. And I say that fishermen in the same way that mankind is a, bilateral species of multiple sexualities. They are fishermen that they cast off deep into the psychic waters of human imagination. And when their hook makes contact with the near future, ripples come backwards in time and inspire people to make it a reality.
Yeah, I can see that.
That may be what the extra dimensional power of creativity is. That's why we're imaginative. After all, your training with the bow and arrow is another similar thing. After all, Mercury uses a bow and arrow to communicate with the heavens. At the top of the ziggurat in the Tower of Babel story, an arrow is attempted to be shot at heaven. So the metaphor of casting imagination into the future as a speculation or even a spiritual exploration is what inspires us to build high towers, to create a ziggurat, to imagine a future where things could be better. That may be the ambition. That may be, I don't see us, in our simplest form, we're four-dimensional creatures because we realize there's a continuity of time in our three-dimensional existence. But creativity may be casting into the fifth dimension, which is a multiplicity of four-dimensional dimensions.
Yeah.
And that's where imagination, the multiverse, alternate realities, and all of these potentials of our near future get discussed, is in the fifth dimension, just beyond time, but not necessarily so far beyond time that they're ridiculous. They're speculations, they're possibilities. We may or may not see that future in much the same way that Arthur C. Clarke's 2001 is a speculation of the near future. They were living, and it was written in an age where we were going to be colonizing the moon in the near future. But social pressures created an environment where that's been put on hold for the time being.
Yeah. I mean, it's an expanding genre, I think, and it goes back to a few. It goes back to a few pioneers. I mean, a few years ago now, I don't know if you ever saw it, but a few years ago now, brain's gone again. The Ridley Scott did a series called Pioneers of Science, or Masters of Science Fiction. I don't actually think he did one on Doc Smith, amazingly enough.
You know what? I spent a little time searching the internet, and very few science fiction historians even earmark this man. And it's a terrible disappointment. People will refer to Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers with absolutely no mention of Smith.
Yeah.
And that only gets my conspiracy mind working on who the hell was this guy that he's not even mentioned in the history.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like his material is self-referential because like the Lensman, like the hereditary intervention that the Arisians are pulling to create the super Lensman,
Yeah.
has kept them isolated from history so that they wouldn't be recognized by the enemy, so that they could continue to move their plan forward.
Hmm.
So is Smith part of that lineage? I'm sure Smith would chuckle and go, maybe.
Well, he brought it, didn't he? He brought himself in, and others as well, as I say, as civilization's historian. I mean, I'm never sure exactly how much of he's appeared, if he ever appears in his own books.
I think that that the character of Seaton in Skylark is probably the closest we'll ever get to him, because he is an all-American guy. He takes icy cold showers. He prefers to smoke his pipe. He does magic tricks. He's well read. He used to be a lumberjack. I mean, he is Smith, in my opinion, in much the same way. But at the same time, he's also Captain Kirk, which is hysterical.
Yeah. Well, the same way that Lazarus Long is Robert Heinlein.
Oh, that could very well be, yeah.
Oh, I'm sure that a lot of what Long comes out with is Heinlein's personality coming out there.
And look at us now, Colin. We are now 2 hours into our show, and we didn't even discuss the format before we went on air. And yet we've covered 2 hours just talking about this man.
As you can probably tell, guys. Yeah.
Yeah. We love this guy, and we've barely scratched the surface.
Yeah.
I could quite literally go through page for page from his entire Lensman series and say, okay, here's a television series. Here's another television series. This is another book series. This is where this character came from. This is based on this old tradition. It's all over the place. This guy has been thoroughly ransacked for his material, and one could call it tribute, but since his name has not been mentioned by any of these people, it feels like some sort of a travesty, because the Jedi Order is the Lensman Council.
Yeah.
Babylon 5 is inspired. The wrist communicators that they have in Babylon 5 are in the exact same position that Kimball Kinnison wears his lens.
What's that? I mean, I follow the Ambassadorial Wing, who's just recently finished doing Babylon 5 reviews, and we're now doing Crusade. And I've heard a couple of times, and unfortunately only one of the people on that channel actually recognised Doc Smith when I said that the Vorlons and the Vorlons are the Arisians and the Shadows are the Adorians.
And they both retire, which is exactly what winds up happening at the end of this series as well. I mean, the Shadows are destroyed, but the Vorlons or the Arisians basically go, you know what? You guys can handle it from here. We're going to go to another dimension. And they slip out.
To take a really odd curve there, Terry Pratchett has a character called Leonard of Quirm, who is basically Leonardo da Vinci of the Discworld. But he describes his mind as Pratchett has a description of inspiration flooding through the universe, and some people are deaf to it, and some people like an open dish antenna, and Leonard is one of those. And I think it's a similar sort of thing. You got these ideas come around, and Doc Smith, Wells, Smith, Burroughs, Verne, etc., were the first ones to come up with these ideas, or to to put them down on paper. Other people have had ideas, inspired by them, spun off them 2, 3, 4 generations down the line till you don't know till you don't actually know where they came from.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but I said, you know, it's a case of which is why I think people should know more about these guys.
Yeah, and in a magical in magic systems, and I'm talking about, you know, mystical systems that actually exist in human history. There is an ether, or what could be called a collective conscience, but is also called the Carson record. What is it called?
The Akashic record.
Yeah, where all of this
I read Dennis
information
Wheatley.
is thoroughly available if you're receptive.
Yeah, I read Dennis Wheatley. And for that matter,
And also Shirley MacLaine introduced us to what she referred to as a K field, where all thought throughout all time and space is available if you could tap into it. You know, almost as a mental energy form.
Yep.
And Smith gets into all of this, of course.
Oh, he gets his shit.
And by the time he finishes up his Skylark series, he's quite literally talking about magic.
Well,
and breaking it down as an actual scientific construct.
Well, to quote Arthur C. Clarke, any sufficiently advanced magic will be indistinguishable. So any sufficiently advanced science will be indistinguishable from magic.
Yep.
And the corollary being magic is just a science you don't understand yet.
And in First Lensman, they have a thing called the golden meteor, which is a device that when touched produces an electromagnetic effect in the brain that introduces an audible signal that is a secret password.
Yeah.
Which is very, very equivalent to our fingerprint access to our own cell phones.
Yeah, true. Yeah. And I mean, the thing is, it's also, I mean, another thing that Smith came up with was the idea of different levels of being. Heinlein came up with something similar in Job, A Comedy of Justice. But there's, I mean, it mainly comes out, in fact, in Masters of the Vortex, which is the only Lensman series which wasn't a Lensman book. But there's a bit where the main character becomes telepathic, but he's reaching out and he actually comes across other minds that operate on different frequencies, I think, on a different level of existence, and he can contact with them. And the basic story is the basic story that ends up that he actually, because he only ends up managing to do this, he actually stops a series of disasters that have been happening because these creatures have been laying their eggs in nuclear power plants, in effect, to put it very, very, very loosely. But again, this idea,
is that true? When was that book written?
It's the 7th one in the series, but it actually takes place between second stage Lensman and Children of the Lens. Because some of the things that happen in that refer to Children of the Lens.
That's the plot device in the current Godzilla universe, right? These beings are born or have eggs inside of a nuclear power plant.
Well, it's not strictly nuclear power plant, but it's their version of the one they because basically what it does is they're called vortex. They create atomic vortices, he calls them.
Right.
Oh
yeah, that's right. I did read that one once.
Yeah, so yeah, because it's if you look at in the series, it's the last one in the series, but chronologically, it has to take place between, or at least it has to take place at least before Children of the Lens, because there's some things that happen in that races are discovered in that which appear in Children of the Lens, and I think there's reasons why some refers to it that it must be after. It must basically be set in that gap.
Yeah, as I said earlier, too, that in the early 50s, late 40s, early 50s, Smith decided to collect all of all of the volumes he had created into a single arc, which we now refer to as the Lensman series.
Yeah.
But he created an entire arc for civilization that started deep in our ancient past and goes all the way to Children of the Lens. And that's when that's when Triplanetary became a member of the Lensman series, and First Lensman was written. And then he wrote Children of the Lens as the final part of the arc.
Yeah. Well, in fact, that's actually sounds like a cue to me. The last bit to close off with, I think, the annex, the very very last bit, Children of the Lens, and it starts off with the narrator. Actually, it starts off with the reader open. Oh, hold on a second. I still got the damn thing here. Did I put it back?
I'm bringing it up right now. The epilogue.
No, the prologue. The epilogue I've got here.
Okay.
The prologue starts something along the lines of, to you, the third entity who has managed to find this. Hold on a second. I did actually write the flipping thing. Did I? But I didn't. Oh, didn't save it. Smeg. I had it from somewhere. However, it starts the basic. It's effectively a framing device, and it starts with say to you who've opened this impenetrable canister, greetings, blah 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 blah. Set up for in other words, a previously in the Lensman universe thing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. He goes through a full recap.
Yeah, but then it ends up at the end after the final thing. It says, to you who have scanned this report, further greetings. Since I, who have compiled it, am only a youth, a guardian only by title, and hence unable to visualize even approximately either the time or the necessity for the opening of this flask of force, I have no idea as to the bodily shape or mental attainments of you, the entity to whom it has now been made available. You probably know something. You already know that civilization is again threatened seriously. This is civilization with a capital C, of course. Mm-hmm. You probably know something of that basic nature of that threat. While studying this tape, you have become informed that the situation is sufficiently grave to have made it again necessary to force certain selected minds prematurely to the third level of lensmanship. You've already learned that in ancient time, civilization after civilization fell before it could rise much above the level of barbarism. You know that we and the previous race of guardians saw to it that this, our civilization, has not yet fallen. Know now that the task of your race, so soon to replace us, will see to it that it does not fail. One of us will become on rapport with you, that's to say, mind-to-mind contact with you, as soon as you have assimilated the facts, the connotations, and the implications of this material. Prepare your mind for contact. And I've still waited, actually. But that's literally how the Lensman series ends.
So epic.
It is.
Yeah. And then you could just go right back to the beginning of Triplanetary and imagine all of the humans as another race.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, it is. It's. I said, I mean, there are. I think there are possibly. I mean, okay, yeah, it says something about my psyche, which is probably not necessarily both about. But there are, I think, two things I kind of could almost say I've been waiting most of my life for. Connected, actually. The first of those is for that particular contact to occur. And the other is for me to break out and become a tomorrow person, the next stage of humanity. A TV show from my youth, my teenage years. But that says something about me, which probably better treated to a psychiatrist.
What Magneto would refer to is, the world of mutants, which is pretty much what Marvel took from the Lensman or the Smith universes. Is this notion that at some point in time, some genetic anomaly or some cosmic debris will force a certain group members of our civilization to become empowered in some extraordinary way that goes beyond our current human condition.
Yeah.
And they will become either superheroes or villains, depending upon the state of humanity at the time.
Tell you what, I'm not sure our civilization is in danger as we speak, but let's not get political.
Yeah, indeed. And let's not get negatively speculative either, because I have high hopes that humanity is a lot stronger than that. And although we may fumble, I don't think we will entirely fail.
No, hopefully not.
I think that humanity is something that is not necessarily connected to the species we are currently. It's something that is connected to the planet and its ambition to be as important and spiritually enlightened as it could possibly be. We are incarnations of the earth.
Yeah, I mean, that's, again, another thing that the Lensman, or a lot of Smith's work was like early work. It was hopeful in its way. Yeah, of course, drama, darkness, drama, bad things happen, but it was overall hopeful.
Yeah, and generously benign. Like you said, Kimball Kinnison would give Superman a run for his money. He was Dudley Do-Right. He was the ultimate Cub Scout. Actually, some of the villains in the story refer to him as a simpering Boy Scout because he's so soft, because he doesn't kill his enemies outright unless they absolutely deserve it.
In fact, doesn't one of the female villains in refer to us? Is it Kinnison or is it one of the younger first Lensmen as a Boy Scout?
Oh yeah, in multiple incarnations, because Jack Kinnison, the younger form, is referred to by one of this beautiful ingenue. She said she keeps on saying to him stuff like, "Oh, do you want a big hug? Do you want to sit on my lap, little Boy Scout boy?" You know, and he's just like terrified of her because he can't believe that anything this beautiful could be so wicked.
Yeah.
And that sets up the James Bond girl.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is. I think Smith was obviously something that a lot of people these days don't seem to understand, was a writer of his time. And there are some things in there, some ideas in there, which we genuinely probably don't share these days, but they're not meant in a way to be in any way put down. I mean, the obvious one, as I say, is the difference in the way his women act and the way, I mean, can you imagine a modern day fourth wave feminist coming across Kinnison describing one of the Iranians as a 7-sector call out and an absolute knockout? Her head would explode.
Yeah.
You know, and he calls women toots and things like this, but that's not actually putting them down. I mean, he's actually being complimentary. You know, and all. I mean, even the villainous female characters, they're good characters. I mean, like, it almost gets the better of Jack Kinnison.
Yep.
The Loranians are quite, you know, the Loranians are quite capable of holding their own.
Yeah, and they're all mentally superior in a lot of ways to most people on Earth.
I mean, I completely forgot that. There's bits, you know, where, you know, their mental powers are quite advanced, even without lenses.
Yep. You know, it's almost as if they're an isolated species that Smith barely addresses, that may have been an offshoot, that they may have been a development of, because Clarissa actually finds her strength while defending the Loranians.
Yeah.
She becomes a lensman wholly to become an operator on Lorraine.
Yeah.
Because the Lorrainians won't even communicate with a man.
Yeah. And Kim, I mean, Kim is by this time he's a second stage lensman. And Helen, Helen is the one he calls Helen of Troy, Helen.
Yeah.
Almost takes him out with a psychic attack, despite the fact he's one of the most powerful psychic characters in civilization.
That's right. Yeah, it's a creature of the mind or a monster of the mind, he calls it.
And she makes it attack him, and he actually spots it, realizes what it is, and turns it back on her. But I mean, she makes him think he's being attacked by.
It's basically a paper tiger in mental form.
Yeah, because that, I mean, I've seen, you've seen that in, again, that sort of thing as you see occasionally comes across, where a mental attack or an illusion, but it's believed enough that the victim, the subject, actually dies, has a heart attack and dies or whatever. You see that every so often in sci-fi and fantasy as well. I mean, what's that but sort of precursor to illusionary magic in fantasy?
Yeah, which is why it's disturbing that fantasy or magic and fantasy, sword and sorcery fiction has joined the science fiction universe, which is kind of depressing to me, because Smith covers all of this while keeping it technological.
Well, then again,
magical systems are barely described as a mechanism in their own right within their own universes. But Smith gives all of these things credence and at least hypothetical speculation in the sciences. He explores the possibilities of all of these magical systems existing at some point in time in the near future as actual sciences. And the Arisians openly claim that there is a science of the mind, and it is beyond mechanism, which is what what the enemy is convinced is the only way to get things done.
Yeah. Well, in fact, it occurs to me that I've never actually managed to see if there's a connection, but in DC Comics, in the Green Lantern series, there is a character called Arisia.
Yeah, and the Lantern Corps was invented after the Lensman Corps.
Oh yeah, I mean,
also
similarities there to
Superman's X-ray vision comes after Kinnison's acquisition of the gift, the power of perception.
Yeah.
So Kinnison had X-ray vision long before Superman did.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I agree, Colin. Our bodies have desires that need to be taken care of, and I think that it was quite obvious to us when we first met that claims for this gentleman, Dr. E.E. Smith, could literally take up 5 to 6 hours easily. Certainly, a part 2 could be in order here.
I mean,
we've barely scratched the surface of this man's incredible bibliographic career.
Yeah, and most of what we've been talking about is in the Lensman anyway, and there's so much else as well. I mean,
we barely touched on the green system, which is entirely copper-based. They all have green blood, like the Vulcans and the Romulans, and that's all in the Skylark series.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't really done that much. I mean, there's so much more in about the Lensman. I mean, all I can say, people, is if you, as long as you can go in with the understanding that Smith was writing in the 20s and the 30s, in 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s America, and that simply means to say that's what his perception is. There's nothing right or wrong about that. Go back and read some of them.
I would suggest even that most of the science fiction that should be explored by deep science fiction fans should be the exploration of pre-World War II science fiction. That field is very rich and filled with some of the most interesting speculative fiction put to paper.
Well, not only well, it's not that. I mean, in that period, I think 1918 is when a gentleman who is probably a lot more famous for a certain loincloth wearing, vine swinging, jungle dwelling English nobleman called Tarzan wrote his first novel, which was called A Princess of Mars.
Yep.
And I think that was 1918 off the top of my head. So yeah. And that again is another novel which started a genre.
Yeah.
Again,
he was talking about a person gaining superpowers merely because of the gravitational profile of a new planet.
Yeah.
Which is something that even today, contemporary science fiction to live action cinema and television has barely scratched the surface on.
Yeah.
You know, John Carter goes to Mars, and because Mars is a smaller planet, the density of his body gives him super strength.
Yeah.
And the ability to leap over tall buildings in a single bound.
Yeah. Not quite on far from the speed.
And we haven't even gotten into A.E. Voigt.
No, this is true.
Or Hamilton, for that matter.
No. There's so many. There really are so many early ones.
And I think the field is deeply rich because of the lack of scientific oppression on their speculations.
Yeah.
Science was still new enough that a young writer could speculate without with abandon.
Yeah.
Into what the possibilities really were, because science was cracking open doors every second.
Certainly the one thing most modern readers will probably notice is, not all the time, but there will be things, I mean, like I said, go even as modern, in air quotes, as the original series of Star Trek, or probably even Next Generation, how our scientific knowledge has advanced. You know, you will come across things in these books which a modern science says, and which our modern understanding of science says, well, actually, no, it doesn't work that way. But because they didn't know that. So, you know, there's and again, storytelling is a factor in there as well, because a lot of these actually came out of the magazines. John F. Campbell, for example, Hugo Gernsback, actually created and edited these things, and people were writing for monthly magazines or monthly
they were serialized in astounding stories, amazing science fiction, and so on. And Smith actually makes reference to those within the novel as well, because Kinnison goes undercover as a science fiction writer.
Yes, he does. Yes. Well, that's fun. That is a really good bit self-referential. Mickey Taken.
Yeah, I mean, he's conscious of what he's doing. He's extremely conscious within his own material of what he's doing. And there's even a discussion between Kim and the admiral, the port admiral, where they're discussing the current understanding of what galactic formation is, how many planets are in unknown galaxies, and so on. And they really get into and mention some scientific letterheads in regard to where their speculations are even finding foundation.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they literally. I mean, you can see it was a scientific age because Lensman in particular literally have reference, and they reference to it, and they bring in scientific authorities to help them understand things. And some of the characters are scientists.
Yeah, and they shrug their shoulders and go, you know what? I don't know. I just don't know. And maybe we should just go find out. Which is what he does, and he discovers the second galaxy.
Yeah.
I mean, until the Stargate series went to Atlantis, I had never seen a science fiction series on screen travel between galaxies, and yet Smith did it in Second Stage Lensman.
The only one that comes to mind is Blake 7, where what were originally supposed to be spoilers, the Daleks, because it was written by Terry Nation, Brian Croucher. At the end of season 2, they're facing an invasion fleet from the Andromeda Galaxy. I think that's the only one that comes to mind, as you say, that was actually where you've got that even hints. I mean, even they've come to us, we don't go to them.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely been, because even the first Stargate movie, they're talking about sending the Stargate. Their first connection in the movie is in another galaxy.
Although they had the aliens in one of these Star Trek episodes, didn't they? But again, yeah, when I hit it.
In Smith's universe, there's a whole sequence where Kinnison is looking out into space between galaxies and just feeling belittled by the vast emptiness between these two galactic bodies.
Yep.
And he's actually traveling at free velocities between these two galaxies. And the only reason why it's possible is because of these cosmic collectors, these cosmic debris collectors that are actually their power generators.
Yeah, and because there's so little actual of anything in the vacuum as well, to let them go. Because that's the other thing, is that the thing that limits when you're inertialess is, even though there's still friction, the inertial travel is limited to basically to friction, to air resistance.
Yeah, galactic air resistance, internal galactic air resistance.
Yeah, because in space isn't a complete vacuum.
Right. Yeah, they even talk about that, which is why they have multiple levels of shielding, which is another thing that Smith handles with grace, and Star Trek seems to fumble all the time. This notion that they have shields. It's like, I mean, in Smith's universe, there are multiple planes that are visible to the eye of shielding. So you could almost imagine it the way a particle of dust sits in water and there's a bubble around the particle of dust. That's the way he almost describes the shielding systems.
And at least his description of, I think it's Nadrak, slowly, mentally drilling through a force shield.
Yeah.
And I mean, the man's ability to describe things was amazing.
Yeah, and if you've ever seen the Evangelion anime series, there's a moment in there where one of the angels creates an AT field in the form of a drill and uses the field to drill down into the earth, which is straight out of Nadrik's equipment. So even today, they're still reaping from this material. I think the Japanese are really reverent of this material. It's the only place I've seen most of this material executed extremely well. Certainly their intergalactic fleets formations in most of the Gundam universe and a lot of their epic space operas, these gigantic formations of dots on screen that are whole galactic patrol forces. Extra-dimensional creatures being held in time-space bubbles. I mean, the Japanese are all over this material. And they do it well. They do it very reverential and very well. There's a scene in an episode of Queen Almeraldus where a shipping vessel is attacked by pirates, and needle beams are used to pierce pieces of equipment on board the ship so that suddenly the ship comes to a roaring halt. And then Queen Amaraldus moves in between the two battling ships and basically blocks all the attacks with her shield generators. And that's straight out of Galactic Patrol.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing to me. It really is amazing because I saw most of the tribute material before I even knew this man existed.
Yeah.
So it's intoxicating to walk through these properties and just be like, oh my God, is this where this came from? Is this the first incarnation of this speculation? Because it's all over the map. He handles all of this material extremely gracefully and fairly well informed too. I mean, I'm not a physicist, but at this point, I think that that's actually a detriment because physicists seem to be limiting themselves on a daily basis. So I think we've kicked this can around the yard long enough.
I think we have that 2.5 hours.
And I want to thank Darren M. for stopping by. And all the listeners in the near future or the deep future who
And
catch
anyone
this
else in the
video on
chat
the
who
rewind.
has been listening.
This has been exactly what I thought it would be, Colin, when I first met you. This was a nice walk down through this man's material, and we've barely scratched the surface on it.
Darren, you and me both, mate. You and me both. I'm not sure little is the word, though. Yeah, I mean, it's if you can find these. I mean, the beauty of some of these things is some of these books are so long out of date that if you can't find them, you don't really feel any guilt about finding places that they're other than Bible, shall we say?
Well, most of the major titles that we spoke of are on Audible.
Oh, right, fair enough, excellent.
And they are available in multiple voice readings. There's one in particular that he does. This one voice actor does both the Skylark and the Lensman series as a single go. So it's all in his same voice continuity. And I think he does a smashing job in kind of a radio announcer, 1940s tongue-in-cheek kind of fashion, which to me is the sound of Smith in my head, because he pulls in that pomp and ceremony of military action. You know, it feels like the marching tunes when the Japanese military confronts Godzilla. It has that kind of, you know, you know, like, let's go get them, boys, you know, like that kind of feeling throughout the piece. I know that Masters of Space and also Galaxy Primes, there's an audio track available on YouTube of a reading of those. And of course, some of these are on LibriVox as well, as amateur readings as well. So the material is out there, and it's certainly worth a listen. Some of it may come off as a bit dated, but I don't see any women stopping wearing dresses, and I still see them wearing heels, and of course they all still wear makeup. So I think it's ironic that modern feminism takes issue with something that they are still on track to achieve in the near future. And the women that are still considered to be women in their own right are very much heading towards the women that are in Smith's universe. They're tough, but they're feminine. They're strong and capable, and yet they're maternal. They're all still heading towards that. I mean, I know several women that still love to see themselves revered as beauties. And men certainly don't shirk the responsibility either. We consider we love being seen as beautiful as well. The male figure and the female figure are still held up on a pedestal. Just ask Chris Hemsworth. So, and Chris would be a perfect member of the Lensman universe.
Yes.
He practically was one in the 2009 Star Trek movie when he played Kirk's father. That was straight out of an episode of Galactic Patrol. He's facing an enemy that is far superior to him, and he just hunkers down and gets the job done. Sorry, honey, but I think I need to blow up now.
Yeah.
And he goes down like a champ and saves the galaxy, just like a hero. And that's Kirk's father in 2009. So, you know, the heritage of this man's work is still very much a part of speculative fiction to this day. It's just a shame that most people don't know him, and it really would be great at some point in time if more people did, which is why we're talking today.
Exactly.
And with that, you can bring us out if you'd like, sir.
Okay, so remember, guys, tomorrow night. Okay, hold on a second. I need to be on the right. Help someone in the right place. Tomorrow night, Let's Talk Geeky is doing the UK comedy show Plebs at 8 o'clock. But in the meantime, go and read E. Doc Smith. Until next time, guys, happy reading. Thank you for listening, and good night.
Night.